afternoon, everyone. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. I was really looking forward to this event, which is quite unique for my background, and have to say that I'm learning a lot from everyone, and I hope that I can convey some new type of message to you. So as I was introduced, I belong to the Cajal Institute in Madrid, which is a neuroscience research institution. In that institute, I direct the Neural Rehabilitation Group, which is a lab that is focused on developing technologies, including robots. Some of the technologies that we build have a body, so I will speak more about machines, or let's say living machines, rather than exclusively about algorithms. So I think that I will try to cover a bit on the AI-based control aspects of interactive robotics, as we name them. So as I was saying, this lab that I coordinate is developing a specific type of robotic systems that could be useful to promote neural recovery after lesions in the nervous system, such as a stroke or spinal cord damage. And in my talk, I will try to show you that for our work and to create this type of artificial living machines, we need to constantly get inspiration from biology, and in particular to think about why the brain has evolved to develop intelligent animals like us, and to achieve such intelligence or intelligent behaviors, as we call them, that we are now trying to transfer to machines. So this is, I think, one of the ingredients that can help in our ongoing discussions about what is the role of artificial intelligence in society, whatever we understand as artificial intelligence. But again, I will try to focus on a perspective that is looking at biology, also because I come from the Cajal Institute, which is an institution that was founded in 1900 upon Santiago Ramón y Cajal, which is considered the father of modern neuroscience. So this is one of the examples of the pioneering work of Cajal, whom received the Nobel Prize in 1920 and became the director of our institute by that time. So Cajal was a unique scientist. He was opposed to the idea that was existing at that moment, that the nervous system was made up of a network of kind of continuous filaments that were kind of a network of filaments that were interconnected one with the other, but in a continuum. So he worked effortlessly to demonstrate that the basic units of the nervous system were represented, on the contrary, by individual cellular elements that we all know now as neurons. So this conclusion is the modern basic principle of the organization of the nervous system as we know it now. Cajal then also very impressively postulated the intrinsic laws that govern the intrinsic properties of these cells. That's very important, cells that are integrated throughout our brains, and how the information from neurons could reach distant locations through axons and so on. And this also turned out to be the basic principle of the functioning of the neural connections. So based on his work, then modern neuroscience evolved with the aid of modern technology that confirmed basically all the discoveries that Cajal made very impressively. Sorry. Okay, so I have this large introduction, and then I will stop again with this question. So why do we have brains? I think it's important to postulate this again if we want to build really intelligent machines. In the 20th century, another founding father of modern neuroscience, Rodolfo Ginás, was convinced that specialized neuronal circuits evolved throughout history to allow neural activity to produce motricity, and together with that, cognition. So the basic mechanism was to produce motion, and then cognition was a result of that. So colleagues of Ginás started to ask questions, of course, asking for a proof of this idea. And in fact, there was already a good example of of this in this type of porifera organism that is sessile. And at some point when it reproduces, it gets to a point where it has found an environment where it wants to be because there is sufficient nutrition. So it locks into that environment. So basically, like a plant, is planted and doesn't need anymore to move to find more nutrition, so it eats its own brain. So basically, the organism doesn't need anymore kind of a primitive brain because it doesn't need anymore to move or to predict where to move. It just eats the brain as nutrition. So Rodolfo Ginás postulated that thinking is a premotor act, basically, and that the original evolutionary use of the nervous system is to move. Then more recently, so these thin tube organisms of 2.1 billion year age were found in a hidden place on the east coast of Africa. So basically, it is plausible that these organisms, really old organisms, were able to move in search of nutrients and oxygen that were produced by bacteria. So animals have evolved from primitive multicellular organisms. And multicellular organisms appeared almost 600 million years ago, which means that cells took almost 4 times longer to be ready or are more difficult to evolve than us as multicellular entities. So this means basically that cells are quite complicated to produce, and these are the basic units of our nervous system. Okay, so that means, according to Ginás, that if you have a set of cells, this set of cells can solve the problem of existing as a set of cells in 2 basic ways. So one is to grow, but maintain itself placed on a point in the ground. But the other solution, of course, is to move actively. So to be able to displace yourself, which has very nice advantages because you can survive if you are able to move. You can survive if there is some danger. If there is a fire and you're a tree, you die. But if somehow you can develop motricity, of course, you can run away from the problem. So there is an enormous advantage, evolutionary advantage of motricity, which is something that basically we take for granted because every act that we perform is the execution of multiple activation of cells that activate many, many muscles. So coming back to this idea, there are 3 basic requirements to produce motricity. One is the ability to move in a coordinated manner. So the second is that you need to have a prediction. Otherwise, you can get in trouble or you can go to the mouth of a predator. So you have to have a sensory component, but the more complicated one, or perhaps the more complex or profound one, is the intentionality. And this has been mentioned before. And perhaps we are lacking this as a natural feature that is embedded in our artificial intelligence. So these are 3 very important properties, at least for the development of motricity. Okay. So according to this perspective, our brain image of or understanding of anything arises from our interaction or manipulation of the physical world. So if we want to produce more intelligent machines, one could say that we need to be able to make them move more intelligently. So basically, we are moving animals that move intelligently. So the more intelligent that we move, the more intelligent that we are. And this type of philosophy or concept we can try to use so that we produce more flexible and intelligent machines or interactive robots. So this is not so easy to achieve. So these are the type of wearable exoskeletons that we developed in our lab. And you can have different type of application domains, different tasks, different physical and cognitive interaction between the machine and the human user. But still, the current stage of the AI of these systems is insufficient to cope with the needs of society. because artificial machines face the problem that they need to be able to cope with a variety of noise and environmental inputs that are unexpected, so they need to learn based on experience. So there is still a lot of work to do if we want to achieve an intelligence that has the level of generalization from one task to the other, rather than having a group of engineers programming each one of these machines. We should try to aim for a more generalized way to solve this matter. So if we want to emancipate machines, eventually at some point, we propose that we need this type of generalization. So aiming at that, we looked at some type of embodied inference so that we could allow the machines to make some sort of inference themselves and take some actions so that they could have this flexibility inherently or tacitly embedded in their own brains. So we started looking around of two examples of this, and we found the proposal by Professor Shimoda from Riken in Japan, in what they named the tacit learning controller, in which a neural controller is accumulating experience to infer or to learn how to handle the interaction with the environment. So this is an example of a very simple child robot that is learning how to handle this perturbation or this continuous fall that is basically controlling this fall step by step that we name walking. So by means of this interaction, by means of the feedback of the robots in the sensor's body, of the sensors in the body, then the accumulation in the tacit learning controller is automatically driving gait. And we took this tacit learning controller together with these Japanese colleagues, and we created an European consortium. So we developed a specific type of tacit learning controller from the Japanese colleagues for our therapeutic exoskeletons. So the aim was that in some way with this tacit learning component, the systems should be able to know how to automatically guide a patient that is receiving a treatment with an exoskeleton robot to try to recover motor control in some way. Basically, the need is that the patient needs to be encouraged during the treatment, but we only should allow the robot to give support as needed. Otherwise, the patient may lose motivation, will slack, and then the promotion of the neuroplasticity will not be optimal. So somehow it made sense to try to test this so that we could, in a way, have some sort of robot-aided treatment that could encourage this active participation. So, and we tested this, and we have proven that this AI-based control of therapeutic exoskeletons is feasible and helps to promote learning that could lead in turn to recovery of function, in particular to the recovery of the lower limb function, balance, and control of walking. However, these approaches in research bring very nice results and advances to evolve these machines to fulfill the requirements for promoting recovery. As I said, active participation, challenging environments, but these still face difficulties to be implemented in real products. Because, of course, as has been said previously, you need to have a legislation, you need to provide liability. What about the ethics? So as long as there is no human component in the robot-aided treatment, then you put the patient at risk and you get in trouble. So this is an open question still. So this brings to the notion of having robot-aided treatment instead of a fully robot-generated treatment, which means that we could try to allow the exoskeletons to incorporate some sort of human input. In this way, in this case, it would mean including perhaps the clinical knowledge at some point, or a particular clinical style or therapeutic methods so that you could have, on the one hand, the advantages of having some sort of automated interaction based on the cycle-to-cycle feedback that the patient is providing based on his or her performance, so that we could address these liability and safety concerns. And also the fear that comes from not being able to anticipate what will happen, which is basically what I think is the problem with this futuristic vision of AI-based machines. So in summary, coming back to the first slides, if we want humans to embrace such a form of emancipated cognition in robots and machines, and perhaps also in algorithms as well, we should be aware that intelligence should be built in the very basic computational elements, hardware, but also maybe distributed in the sensory and effector units. We also should be reminded that producing these basic blocks, even if they may look very simple, they might take a lot of time or a lot of effort than the emancipated algorithms or robots themselves in a comparison against the evolution that I presented at the beginning. And last but not least, we should try to see how do we include this intentionality to do something as a very important parameter or feature that should be included, if possible, with some kind of human component, so that we are always under a humanistic approach of robot-based work or robot-based, in this case, assistance of therapy. And with this, I finalize my presentation. Thank you very much.